Hello, it's Lizzie, and I'm here today with an autism video. I would like to talk about autism support needs levels and other labels, and how they fit into my life. So, if you are an autistic person who wants to just listen to other people's experiences and learn and connect, I would love to hear anything that you have to say in the comments, and also I would appreciate any neurotypical or allistic viewers who just want to learn. I appreciate that so much. So, as we all hopefully know, the autism spectrum is a very wide spectrum, and no two people will have the exact same experience, even if they do have the same labels or levels. Um, so, what you might be most familiar with is functioning labels like high functioning or low functioning. These are disliked by a lot of people, both autistic and in caregiver communities, because the high functioning label takes away a lot of the experience and struggle. It's very invalidating. I don't know if that's the right word. And then the idea of calling someone low functioning just seems very dehumanizing. And that's something that people don't need. They don't need to be dehumanized when they're already facing that for being disabled. So many people now use support level needs, like high support needs, medium support needs, and low support needs, which I think are much better. They also, though, are still kind of vague and leave a lot of room for interpretation and misunderstanding. There's also diagnostic levels, like level 1, level 2, level 3. I do not have experience with these. I'm not sure if they were being used at the time I was diagnosed. But I don't really understand those, but I'm assuming that they're similar to support needs levels, like that level 1 might be low support needs. I should have researched that before I did this video, but if you have any information about that, I would love to hear that in the comments. So, I was personally diagnosed with autism when I was 9 years old, and I was initially diagnosed with the now defunct in the US label of Asperger's syndrome. I think, based on my own memories of the diagnostic process and what I've talked about and heard from other autistic people who either had this label or were denied this label in favor of a different one, I think there's 3 reasons that I got that label as opposed to just a plain autism diagnosis at the time. 1, I was very academically successful. I was very book smart. And I was a very academically successful kid. So I think they associated academic intelligence with the label of Asperger's more than other autistic labels. 2, I am female. And it seems like a lot of autistic girls or transmasculine people who are diagnosed are kind of assumed that we have higher functioning levels, as they would have said at the time. And 3, this is the most ridiculous one. I was very sarcastic. I really actually specifically remember in my diagnostic process when I was 9 years old, them testing me for dry humor, and using that as a part of my autism testing and my autism screening was the type of humor that I had, which I think is a little weird. I'm sure they didn't have any poor intentions at the time. I'm not sure if that's still used. As I've grown over the past 16 years since my diagnosis, I don't have the traits associated with Asperger's syndrome anymore. I have changed a lot, and that label, even if it wasn't now defunct, I don't think it would suit me anymore, if it ever did. I masked a lot, but I masked very ineffectively. I masked since as soon as I can remember, but the ways I masked, like I said, very ineffectual. I masked with the sarcasm and dry humor. I masked with social hostility and a monotone voice. I was very prickly in a still noticeably autistic way. I don't think, even though I masked with such inversely autistic traits, that most of my peers did not know I was autistic, and on the occasion that they found out, they were surprised, um, because of misinformation and lack of information, especially in our very rural area, and just stereotypes about what autism looks like. Even though they didn't know I was autistic, they still knew I was very different, though. And since early middle school, I faced a lot of bullying. And the bullying pushed me further into those masking traits, especially into that social hostility, which was not helpful for anything. So you may have heard the term skill regression. This usually refers to late diagnosed autistics who find themselves losing their abilities to mask or endure sensory sensitivities or socialize the way they did prior to their diagnosis or understanding that they had autism. So that's something you would usually see with someone who's diagnosed as a teenager or as an adult, and you would wonder, well, this person got their autism diagnosis and now they act more autistic. That's because of skill regression. It's not faking. It is an actual symptom. I was not necessarily late diagnosed because I was still a kid, but I still experienced this in a way, but from different things. I experienced a lot of complex trauma in my preteen and teen years that really took my social battery and capabilities down a notch. And I feel like I lost a lot of my ability also to mask. I still try to mask sometimes, but like I said, it is never effective. And the only people who don't notice something is off are usually older people who don't have an understanding of autism or other neurodivergence. As I grew in general, a lot of my symptoms and traits became more prevalent because they are things associated more often with childhood. I carry my dolls and stuffed animals everywhere with me. They are very, very important to me. I mostly watch kids media and read like middle grade fiction, even though I can read at higher levels. I tend to relate more to stories about children and young teens. And I watch children's movies and children's shows. It's very rare, actually, that I watch something adult. And I also have a very strong anxious attachment to my mother. So what would be my support level? Support needs level. I don't really know. This is my notes. I don't really know what level other people might apply to me. I am very childlike. I cannot work. I struggle very much with living alone / apart from my mom. Both on an emotional level, I get very, very distressed. And also on like a technical level, I have a very hard time keeping up with tasks like cleaning and hygiene. I cannot drive. I do have a support worker through my community mental health who helps me with some of these things weekly. She will take me to the grocery store or help me clean the kitchen. And also my mom does her best to come over and help me, and we talk on the phone a lot, and she'll talk me through things. I am very visible as an autistic person because I always have my dolls. I usually wear ear defenders if I'm somewhere loud. I've been wearing earplugs more often recently, though, so that's not as visible. I use other sensory tools. Like I have I'm not wearing it right now, but I have a stim necklace that you chew on. I have like just a lot of like little stim toys and stuff that I carry with me all the time, in addition to my dolls. And I also stim very openly, I think. And aside from involuntarily stimming, when I am repressing my stims, it will come out in the form of an anxious tic, which is something I have a problem with that is separate to my autism. I believe, anyway. Like I said, I don't mask very often or very well. I use my real voice, which is what I'm doing now, which is more childlike in intonation. I stumble over my words more for some reason, even though I'm more comfortable speaking when I use it. Um, but there are still times that I kind of snap into masking inadequately out of either fear or an obligation, feeling like I'm going to embarrass someone. Um, and I also do have other disabilities and conditions, physical and mental. So, all of these things considered, I usually would consider myself medium support needs, but other people might not agree with that label for me, and that's okay. The thing is, I want to have low support needs. I want to be able to drive, to have my own apartment, to do my laundry and grocery shop by myself, and just feel more capable. And I take steps every day to try to make that my reality. But the thing is, I don't know if I'll ever be able to get to that point because my disabilities are disabling. It's not something I can just power through. I understand why sometimes low support needs autistics will resist the label of low support needs or feel invalidated by it. And they can be used harmfully and to invalidate people's experiences. But I think it's very important that all of us are not supportive, very appreciative of what needs we are able to have met and what capabilities we do have. Let me look. I'm sorry. I have my notes right here. Let me see where I was. It's important for us to acknowledge and be glad of our abilities, our support systems, and acknowledge our subsequent privileges in regards to high support needs autistics and non-speaking autistics especially, who like how I would like to have lower support needs. I'm sure they also wish to have lower support needs. Not because we don't want to be autistic, but because we still want to live our lives. And it's hard to do that when you rely on other people for everything. Although we are all interdependent. When you have certain disabilities, you do rely on other people for your health, your safety. And that's really hard. I struggle a lot from my autism and from my other conditions, but I have a lot of privilege as an autistic person, and a lot more agency and I'm so sorry. I'll be right there. Autonomy. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. A lot more agency and autonomy. And we also have to remember when we have these conversations that it's usually a very narrow scope, and we need to acknowledge the barriers to diagnosis and in healthcare for autistic people, especially things like racism, homelessness, immigration, transphobia, familial abuse. There's so many things that can keep people from getting the care that they need and that can stop them from getting their diagnosis in general, even if they don't have low support needs. People tend to think that if you are diagnosed later or undiagnosed, that you have low support needs, but that's not always the case. We also have to remember that there are autistics all across the world, not just in the United States and the UK and Canada. There are autistic people in every country on earth. There are autistic people who are displaced by war or living in war zones, who do not have access to proper health care or supports that they need. So it's all very complicated. No two autistic people, again, like I said, are the same regardless of where they are in this world. Some autistic people might be like very academically successful like I was and not be able to tie their shoes. That was me for several years. I really struggle. I still can't tie them the regular way. There are autistic people who are non-speaking but maybe can write, who can write stories or poetry. And there are autistic people who maybe mask a lot throughout the day to get through a job so they can survive. But because of how much they're masking, it takes away a lot of their executive functioning power. and maybe they can't cook for themselves when they come home. They feel like they have to either have something microwaved or fast food, and that sucks. So I guess I didn't wind this down very well. But I think it's more important than labeling our needs and differences, although it does have a place. It's more important for us to just support each other's needs as they show up. And that's what I've got to say. Again, I would love to hear your experiences in the comments, your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.